The phone's vibration sliced through the stillness of my bedroom, a harsh jolt that shattered the haze of late-night scrolling. My thumb froze above the screen, the glow of an unknown number burning into my eyes like a premonition. A cold knot tightened in my chest, urging me to answer, as if ignoring it would unravel reality itself. I pressed the phone to my ear, my breath shallow, trembling. "Hello? Is this Pearl Carter?" The voice was sharp, official, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Yes, who's this?" My words quivered, betraying the dread pooling in my gut. "Officer Bradley, Portland Police Department. Your mother's been in an accident. Hit by a truck on Route 17. The world stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat a deafening hammer strike. "Is she alive?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. "She's critical. Paramedics are taking her to St. Mary's Hospital. You need to get there now." I don't recall slipping on my shoes or fumbling for my keys. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped my phone as I stumbled out the door into the biting night air. The city blurred past as I sped through it, streetlights smearing into streaks of gold, the road a tunnel pulling me toward my mother. What if I'm too late? The thought clawed at my mind, relentless, a parasite burrowing deeper with every mile. Memories of her flooded in. Her warm laugh, the way she'd tuck me in as a child, her voice promising everything would be okay. Now those memories felt like ghosts, slipping through my fingers. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, willing the car to move faster, to outrun the fear threatening to swallow me whole. When I reached Route 17, the scene was a nightmare, painted in red and blue. Police lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the pavement. Shattered glass glittered under the glow, scattered like broken stars. My mother's car sat crumpled, a twisted husk of metal, its frame bent like a discarded toy. A massive truck loomed nearby, its driver pale, his hands trembling as he spoke to an officer, his face etched with shock. Then I saw her. Paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, her face a mask of blood, her body limp, her clothes soaked crimson. My legs nearly gave out, a sob catching in my throat. "Mom!" I cried, rushing forward, my voice raw, desperate. A paramedic turned, his eyes urgent but steady. "Are you her daughter?" I nodded, words trapped in my chest. "We're taking her to St. Mary's. Follow us." The hospital was a sterile labyrinth, its antiseptic scent stinging my nose, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. I followed the paramedics through swinging doors, the chaos of the emergency room swallowing me whole. Nurses shouted orders. Machines hummed with urgency, and the air felt thick with despair, pressing against my skin. A doctor approached, his face grim, his eyes heavy with the weight of bad news. "Miss Carter, your mother's lost a lot of blood. We're doing everything we can, but her chances are slim." His words were a blade slicing through my hope, leaving it in tatters. My knees buckled and I sank onto a bench in the empty hallway, the cold white tiles staring back at me, unyielding. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat, frozen, my mind screaming for a miracle to pull her back from the abyss. Hours bled together, the weight of waiting crushing my chest. My eyelids grew heavy, the world fading as exhaustion dragged me under, pulling me into a restless, dreamlike haze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging across the tile. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The hallway was dim, fluorescent lights flickering like a faltering pulse. A silhouette moved at the far end. A man in a hospital gown, his bare feet scraping the floor with a slow, unnatural rhythm. His movements were wrong, too slow. His head tilted at an angle that defied human anatomy, his arms dangling lifelessly at his sides. His skin was gray, almost translucent, glowing faintly under the weak light, as if he didn't fully belong to this world. He's just a patient, I told myself, my breath shallow, but my body screamed otherwise. A cold sweat prickled my skin, my fingers gripping the bench's edge. As he passed beneath a flickering light, he turned his head slightly. And I saw it, a smile, too wide, too sharp, his teeth bared like a predator's, glinting in the dark. My breath caught, a shiver racing down my spine, rooting me to the spot. Don't look at him, don't move. But my voice betrayed me. Sir? It was barely a whisper, trembling in the heavy air. He stopped, his head turning slowly, deliberately, toward me. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice soft, cold, like a blade sliding across my skin. My stomach dropped, a wave of nausea rising. Before I could speak, he shuffled toward a nearby door, his movements jerky as if pulled by invisible strings. Don't follow him, my mind screamed. But my legs moved anyway, drawn to the unknown as if compelled by some unseen force. The door led to a small chapel, a place I'd glimpsed earlier, a sanctuary for desperate prayers, a refuge for those clinging to hope. But as I stepped inside, the air shifted, heavy, suffocating, like stepping into a dream gone horribly wrong. The dim lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls, twisting into shapes that didn't belong, clawing. Hands, hollow faces, forms that seemed to writhe in the corners of my vision. The room smelled of dust, old wood, and something darker, something rotten, like decay lurking beneath the surface. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in my ears, urging me to turn back. The man stood at the altar, his back to me, his shoulders trembling as if racked by an unseen cold. Low, raspy whispers spilled from him, words I couldn't grasp, slithering under my skin like a living thing. They weren't English, weren't anything I knew, just a cadence of malice crawling through the air. Leave. Now. My legs trembled, but I couldn't move, trapped in the dreamlike haze of the moment. Sir, are you okay? My voice wavered, barely audible, swallowed by the oppressive silence. He didn't answer. His whispers grew faster, more frantic, his fingers twitching like spiders skittering across a web. His head jerked, a sharp, unnatural motion, as if fighting some internal force. I stepped back, my breath shallow, my mind screaming, "Run!" Then he turned. His face was a nightmare made flesh, his skin stretched too tight over his skull, like it might tear at any moment, revealing something unspeakable beneath. His eyes were sunken, black voids that swallowed the light, endless and hungry, pulling me in against my will. His mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing jagged, sharp teeth, glinting like knives in the flickering glow. A guttural sound rumbled from his throat. Not human, not alive. A sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper, somewhere wrong. My scream tore from my chest, raw and desperate, as darkness swallowed me whole, pulling me into a void where time and reality dissolved. I woke in a hospital bed, morning light streaming through the window, soft and warm, chasing away the night's terror. My body ached, my head pounding as if I'd been struck. A nurse stood beside me, her face kind but etched with concern. "Miss Carter, you gave us a scare. We found you unconscious in the chapel." My heart raced as the memory flooded back. Those eyes, that smile, the voice that wasn't human. "The man," I gasped, bolting upright, my voice trembling. "The patient in the gown. He was there." The nurse frowned, her brow creasing with confusion. "What patient? No one else was in the chapel. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" I wanted to scream that it was real, that I'd seen him, felt his presence like a weight on my soul. But doubt crept in, cold and heavy, whispering that my mind, frayed by grief and exhaustion, had conjured him. Had it? The nurse's smile softened, her hand resting gently on my arm. Good news, though. Your mother made it through surgery. She's stable. Relief crashed over me like a wave, tears spilling down my cheeks, warm and unstoppable. I gripped her hand, the warmth grounding me, tethering me to reality. Later, I sat by my mother's bed, her hand fragile but alive in mine. Her chest rose and fell, each breath a quiet victory. She was here fighting, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold dread that still lingered in my bones. But even as I held her, the chapel haunted me. Those black eyes, that grotesque smile, they clawed at my mind, refusing to fade. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, fear, a trick of the mind pushed to its breaking point. But deep down, I knew. Hospitals are places of healing where life clings to hope. But that night, something else walked those halls. Something that watched, waited, and smiled. A presence that wasn't bound by flesh or reason. Sometimes in the quiet moments when the hospital's hum fades, I feel it still. Lurking just out of sight, its eyes fixed on me, waiting for me to look too long into the shadows. And in those moments, I wonder if it was ever just a dream, or if it's still there, waiting for me to return. The first night in my new home felt like a dream stolen from someone else's life. A quiet street, the soft hum of crickets, the promise of a fresh start. I stood on the porch, breathing in the cool air, letting it wash away the chaos of the city I'd left behind. This was my sanctuary, my escape. But as I turned to go inside, my eyes caught something across the street. A figure, still as stone, sat on the neighbor's porch. Her silhouette was faint under the dim glow of a single bulb, but I could feel her watching me. My skin prickled, a warning I couldn't name. I told myself it was nothing, just the unease of a new place. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. The house was modest, a 2-story relic with creaky floors and windows that rattled in the wind. I'd chosen it for its simplicity, its promise of peace. The neighborhood was small, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business, or so I'd been told. My first day unpacking was a blur of cardboard boxes and half-remembered furniture, arrangements. By evening, exhaustion pulled me to the porch again, a glass of iced tea in hand. That's when I saw them. My neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Turner. Mr. Turner was a lanky man, his face carved with deep lines, his eyes sharp like he was always calculating something. He waved from his lawn, a stiff gesture that didn't reach his face. Beside him in a wheelchair was Judy. She sat motionless, her hands folded in her lap, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something far away. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. I raised a hand in greeting, but Judy didn't move. She just sat there, her eyes locked on some distant point, unblinking. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing against my chest. I forced a smile and turned away, but the weight of her gaze lingered, a cold finger tracing down my spine. Days passed, and I tried to settle into the rhythm of the neighborhood. Mr. Turner would nod when we passed, his voice rough as gravel when he spoke about the weather or the best way to trim the hedges. But Judy, she was a ghost in plain sight. Every evening, she was there on the porch, her wheelchair angled toward my house. I'd catch her staring, her eyes wide and empty, like twin voids swallowing the fading light. I told myself it was nothing, just an old woman lost in her own world. But the way her gaze followed me, unyielding, made my stomach twist. One evening, As I watered the roses along my fence, I glanced up and froze. Judy's eyes were on me, unblinking, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her lips parted slightly as if whispering something I couldn't hear. My hands shook, water spilling over my shoes. I looked away, counting to 10 in my head, willing my heart to slow. When I looked back, she was still staring, her face unchanged, her eyes boring into mine like she could see through me. The air grew thick, the scent of roses turning sour in my throat. I stumbled back inside, locking the door behind me, my breath ragged. It was just my imagination, I told myself, just the stress of moving. But the image of her face stayed with me, burned into my mind like a photograph I couldn't tear up. The next few nights were a descent into a waking nightmare. I started noticing things, small, inexplicable things. The roses I'd watered were wilting, their petals curling inward as if poisoned by something unseen. The air in the house grew stale, carrying a faint musty scent, like damp earth or something rotting just out of sight. I'd wake to find my windows fogged, faint smudges on the glass like someone had pressed their hands against it from the outside. I told myself it was the weather, the humidity, anything but her. But the truth was creeping closer, wrapping its cold fingers around my heart. One night, I found an old photo in the attic, tucked inside a dusty book left by the previous owners. It showed a woman in a wheelchair, her face blurred but unmistakable. Judy. She was smiling, but not like the Judy I knew. This smile was warm, alive, human. The date on the back read 1978, long before her supposed paralysis. My hands shook as I held it, my mind racing. Who was she? What was she? I remembered a story my grandmother used to tell about a woman in her village who'd made a pact with something dark, trading her soul for a life that wouldn't end. I'd laughed it off as a child, but now, staring at Judy's face in that photo, I wasn't so sure. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in, the air thick with a presence I couldn't shake. That night I lay in bed, the house creaking around me like it was alive. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the streetlights outside. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw Judy's face. Those empty eyes, that unnatural stillness. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Mr. Turner had explained it all when I'd asked about her one morning, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Judy's been paralyzed for 12 years, he'd said, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. Grief, maybe, or something darker. She just sits there staring at nothing. Doctors say there's no hope. His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. If she was paralyzed, why did it feel like she was watching me? Why did her gaze feel so alive, so hungry? I pulled the blankets tighter, trying to shake the thought. But then it came, a sound that turned my blood to ice. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the house like a heartbeat. My eyes snapped to the clock, 1:03 a.m. My mouth went dry, my body frozen. I waited, holding my breath, praying it was a mistake. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time, insistent. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold against the floor, and crept to the window. Peering through the curtains, I saw her, Judy, standing on my porch. Not in her wheelchair, standing. Her frail body was hunched, her head tilted to one side, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. My breath caught, a scream trapped in my throat. This wasn't possible. She couldn't be here. I blinked, hoping it was a dream, but when I looked again, she was still there, her silhouette sharp against the darkness, her gaze piercing through the glass. I stumbled back, my heart racing. My mind screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me downstairs, my hands trembling as I gripped the banister. The air felt wrong, heavy with something I couldn't name, like the house itself was holding its breath. I reached the front door, my fingers hovering over the lock. "Don't open it," a voice in my head begged. But I had to know, I had to see. I turned the knob, the door creaking open, and there was nothing. The porch was empty, the night silent except for the faint rustle of leaves. My knees buckled, relief and terror crashing over me in waves. I slammed the door shut, locking it, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I leaned against the wall, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. It wasn't real, it couldn't be real. But as I climbed the stairs, the image of Judy standing there, her eyes locked on mine, refused to fade. It was as if she'd left a piece of herself behind, a shadow that clung to the walls of my home. The next morning, I found Mr. Turner in his yard, raking leaves with a mechanical precision. I hesitated, my throat tight, but I had to ask. "Mr. Turner," I said, my voice shaking, was she out last night?" His face darkened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "What kind of question is that?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. "My wife can't move. She hasn't walked in 12 years. You think this is funny?" I stammered, trying to explain, but his anger stopped me cold. "I saw her," I insisted, my voice barely above a whisper. "She was standing at my door." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and sour. "Don't you ever say that again," he hissed. "You're imagining things." I backed away, my heart pounding, his words echoing in my head. Was I losing my mind? Had the stress of moving broken something inside me? But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Judy on the porch. Her head was tilted toward me, her eyes locked on mine, her lips curling into a faint, unnatural smile. My stomach dropped, my vision blurring. She wasn't just watching me, she was waiting. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind felt like a warning. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying Judy's face, those empty eyes, that twisted smile. I told myself it was all in my head, a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion. But then I heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze, a slow, scraping noise like nails dragging across concrete. It was coming from outside, steady and deliberate, growing louder with each passing second. My heart hammered, my mouth dry, as I crept to the window. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I parted the curtains, my hands trembling. And there she was, Judy in the middle of my yard, her wheelchair tipped over behind her, her frail body dragging itself across the pavement. Her nails clawed at the ground, leaving streaks of blood in their wake. Her head was tilted at an impossible angle, her eyes glinting like polished glass. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat, my mind screaming that this couldn't be real. But the sound didn't stop. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was closer now, right outside my door. I pressed myself against the wall, my hands covering my mouth to stifle a sob. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. A single bony finger against the wood, slow and deliberate, like a countdown to something unspeakable. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, my knees pulled to my chest, waiting for dawn. The tapping stopped eventually, but the silence was worse. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for her to return. When morning came, I forced myself to look outside. The yard was empty, the wheelchair gone, but the pavement was marked with faint, dark streaks, like something had been dragged across it. I told myself it was dirt, a trick of the light, anything but what I feared. But the truth was clawing at the edges of my mind, refusing to be ignored. Judy wasn't just a neighbor. She was something else, something that didn't belong in this world. I avoided the Turner's house after that, keeping my curtains drawn, my doors locked. But I could feel her eyes on me, always watching, always waiting. One night I woke to a sound that made my heart stop, a low, raspy giggle, like dry leaves, skittering across the ground. I bolted upright, my skin crawling, my eyes darting to the window. Judy was there, standing by my fence, her head twisted completely around, her face a nightmare of sagging skin and bloodshot eyes. Her mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, her lips trembling as she laughed, a sound that burrowed into my skull. As her head twisted, her laughter grew louder, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't natural. It was as if the night itself was laughing with her, the wind carrying her voice, wrapping it around me like a noose. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose stone, my hands scraping against the pavement as I fell. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the terror clawing at my chest. Her eyes never left mine, those bloodshot orbs glowing in the moonlight, pinning me in place. I remembered the photo, the story, the way my grandmother's voice had trembled when she spoke of things that lingered too long. Was Judy even alive? Or was she something else, something trapped between worlds, bound to this house, this street, this moment? My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body was heavy as if the ground itself was pulling me down. Her grin widened, her teeth glinting like shards of broken glass. She took a step forward, her bare feet dragging across, the pavement leaving dark smears behind. The air grew colder, the scent of decay overwhelming, filling my lungs until I could barely breathe. I clawed at the ground, forcing myself to stand, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I screamed, stumbling back, my hands fumbling for the phone. But when I looked again, she was gone, the night silent once more. The days that followed were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every shadow, every sound was her. I'd see her in the corner of my eye, her wheelchair abandoned, her body dragging itself closer. I'd hear her laughter in the wind, her tapping at my door. I confronted Mr. Turner again, my voice shaking with desperation. "She's not paralyzed," I said, my words tumbling out. "She's out there every night watching me." He laughed, a cold, bitter sound that made my skin crawl. "You're losing it," he said, his eyes glinting with something cruel. "Get some help." But I saw the way his hands trembled, the way his gaze darted to his house. He knew something. He had to. That night I heard it again. The scraping, the tapping, the laughter. I didn't look this time, I couldn't. I packed a bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it. I had to leave, had to escape before she came for me. As I stepped onto the porch, the air felt thick, alive with something malevolent. I glanced at the Turner's house one last time. Judy was there, on the porch, her wheelchair empty, her eyes locked on mine, her head twisted slowly, impossibly, her grin widening until it seemed to split her face in two. I ran to my car, my heart pounding, my vision blurring with tears. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But as I drove away, the sound of her laughter followed me, echoing in my mind. A reminder that some things can never be escaped. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and old memories when I first opened the wooden box left by my grandmother. Inside, nestled in faded red cloth, was the jester clown doll, its porcelain face gleaming under the faint light of my attic. Its painted grin stretched too wide, unnatural, as if it knew something I didn't. Its blue eyes, cold and glassy, seemed to follow me, unblinking, piercing through the dimness. The tattered red and gold outfit clung to its fragile frame, and the jester hat with its drooping points and tiny bells felt like a warning I couldn't yet understand. Why had she kept this thing? My grandmother, with her warm hugs and endless stories, had never mentioned it. Was it a childhood toy, or something darker, something she hid even from herself? My fingers trembled as I touched the cloth, the bells, giving a faint, eerie jingle that seemed to echo too long in the silent room. I shut the box, my chest tight, and carried it home, unable to throw away something tied to her memory. That night, sleep came reluctantly, my mind tangled in questions about the doll. Close your eyes, just rest, I told myself. But the darkness felt alive, pressing against me. I drifted into a dream, or so I thought, where my bedroom was no longer mine. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. My body was paralyzed, my limbs heavy as stone, pinned to the bed by an unseen force. "You're dreaming, wake up!" I screamed inside, but my voice was trapped. Then, a soft jingle broke the silence, delicate yet piercing, like a child's laughter twisted into something wrong. It came from the foot of my bed, growing louder, closer. My eyes strained in the dark, and there it was, the jester doll, no longer small but life-sized, standing in the shadows. Its porcelain face loomed, the grin wider now, splitting its face like a wound. Those blue eyes glowed, not with light, but with something alive, something watching. "I like watching you sleep," it whispered, its voice a sickening blend of playfulness and menace. My heart pounded, my lungs burned, but I couldn't move. It leaned closer, the bells on its hat swaying, jingling, filling my ears until I thought they'd burst. Wake up now!" I screamed internally, and with a gasp I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted around me like restraints. The room was quiet, too quiet, but my eyes darted to the chair in the corner. The doll sat there staring, though I swore I'd left it on the shelf across the room. Was I losing my mind, or was it moving? The next day I tried to shake it off. "It's just a doll, just grief playing tricks," I told myself. But the unease clung to me like damp air. I moved the doll to the living room shelf, its glassy eyes following me as I walked away. That night the dream returned, sharper, more vivid. I was back in my bed, the room bathed in an unnatural silence as if the world held its breath. My body was frozen again, my chest tight like something was sitting on it. Look away. Don't look, I thought, but my eyes betrayed me, drawn to the chair in the corner. It was empty. My heart stopped. Then from under the bed, that jingle again, slow, deliberate, like footsteps creeping closer. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, as a porcelain hand, cracked and cold, slid over the edge of the mattress. The jester's face emerged, its grin impossibly wide, its eyes black pits now, swallowing the light. "Why did you take me?" it hissed, its voice crawling into my skull, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. I bolted awake, my body shaking, my throat raw as if I'd been screaming. I grabbed my phone, the flashlight trembling in my hand, and scanned the room. The chair was empty. My heart sank as I leaned over the bed, shining the light underneath. Nothing. But when I turned back, the doll was on my nightstand, facing me, its grin mocking my fear. "This isn't real. It can't be," I whispered, but my voice broke. Days blurred into a haze of dread. The doll kept moving, appearing in places. I hadn't left it. I'd lock it in a closet only to find it on the couch hours later, its bells gleaming under the lamplight. I'd leave it in the kitchen and it would be on my bed by nightfall, its head tilted as if listening. "You're imagining it. You're just tired," I told myself. But then came the laughter. soft, high-pitched giggles echoing through the house. At midnight, bouncing off the walls, seeping into my bones. I'd lie awake, heart racing, clutching my phone, too afraid to move. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the doll, its cold porcelain burning my hands, and ran to the basement. The air down there was musty, heavy with the smell of damp earth and forgotten things. I found an old wooden chest, threw the doll inside, and locked it tight. Stay there, stay gone, I thought, slamming the basement door behind me. For a moment I felt safe, the silence a fragile relief. But that night the sounds returned. Heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, paced outside my bedroom door. Thud, thud, thud. My breath caught, my body frozen under the covers. Then, a new sound. A childlike sob, soft but filled with pain, clawing at my heart. "Let me out," a voice whispered. So close it felt like it came from inside my skull. I didn't sleep, didn't move, just lay there, eyes wide, until dawn broke. The next night was worse. The dream came again, but this time I wasn't just paralyzed. I was suffocating. A crushing weight pressed on my chest, stealing my breath. I opened my eyes, and there it was, the jester doll sitting on me. Its porcelain hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing tighter, tighter. Its grin split its face, teeth jagged, eyes glowing with malice. "You can't get rid of me," it whispered. "I belong to you now." My vision blurred, my lungs screamed for air, and then I woke gasping, my throat burning as if it had been real. I stumbled to the doorway, and there it was, the doll, lying face up, staring at me from the floor. How did it get out? I couldn't stay in that house another night. With shaking hands, I wrapped the doll in its red cloth, the bells jingling faintly, mockingly. I drove to my grandmother's grave, the cemetery cloaked in a cold, whispering wind. The trees swayed, their shadows dancing like specters. I stood before her headstone, clutching the doll, my voice trembling. "I don't know why you kept this thing," I said, my breath visible in the chilly air. "But I can't have it." I placed the doll at the foot of her grave, stepping back quickly as if it might reach for me. For a moment the world was still, the silence heavy. Then as I turned to leave, a faint jingle cut through the air, sharp and clear, like a laugh in the dark. I froze, my heart pounding, but I didn't look back. I ran to my car, the engine roaring as I sped away, the sound of those bells chasing me into the night. Even now, months later, I can't escape it. The doll is gone, left behind in that cold cemetery, but its presence lingers. In the quiet of my new apartment, when the world is still, I hear it. A soft, distant jingle, like a memory that refuses to die. It's not real. It's not here, I tell myself. But my hands shake as I check the locks each night. The jester's grin is burned into my mind, its blue eyes watching from the shadows of my dreams. Sometimes I wonder if it ever belonged to my grandmother at all, or if it chose me, waiting, always waiting, for the moment I let my guard down. This story was inspired by a video of a clown doll inherited from a grandmother which began moving around a man's house, captured on camera and shared online, sparking fear and questions about its true nature. My phone buzzed on the table, a sharp vibration that cut through the soft hum of the evening. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from a friend, but the notification stopped my heart. "Jason Buchanan is live." The name alone sent a chill down my spine, dragging up memories of whispered scandals and Britney Spears' haunted eyes in old news clips. Jason, her ex-husband from that fleeting, chaotic 55-hour marriage, wasn't just a ghost from her past. He was a shadow that refused to fade. My thumb hovered, torn between dread and curiosity. Don't click it, my mind warned, but my finger betrayed me, tapping the screen. The live stream flickered to life, and there he was, standing in the twilight outside Brittany's sprawling Thousand Oaks mansion. His face was gaunt, eyes glassy with a manic intensity, the camera shaking in his trembling hands. "I'm here for you, Brittany," he said, his voice low, dripping with a twisted sense of purpose. My chest tightened, the air in my room growing, heavy, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The feed panned across the front yard, its neatly trimmed hedges and pristine walkway bathed in the fading light. Jason's breath was ragged, his movements jerky, like a predator circling its prey. He approached the front door, his fingers testing the handle, his frustration palpable when it didn't budge. "Locked," he muttered, his voice sharp with irritation. My heart raced, each second stretching into eternity as he circled the house, the camera catching glimpses of darkened windows and his reflection, a pale, distorted figure in the glass. I wanted to look away, to close the app, but I couldn't. It was like watching a nightmare unfold, each moment blurring the line between reality and a dream I couldn't escape. He's going to do something terrible, I thought, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone. Then came the sound, a sharp, piercing crack as he smashed a window. My stomach lurched, the noise echoing in my ears like a gunshot. "I'm here," he murmured, climbing through the jagged opening, his voice a mix of exhilaration and delusion. "This is where I'm supposed to be." Inside, the house was eerily silent, its polished floors gleaming under soft recessed lighting. The camera swept across the living room, lingering on plush furniture and framed photos, each item a piece of Brittany's sanctuary now violated. Jason's footsteps echoed, deliberate and heavy, as he moved through the space, his hands brushing over a velvet couch, a glass coffee table, as if claiming them as his own. My breath caught, the intimacy of his actions sending a wave of nausea through me. This wasn't just a break-in, it was an invasion, a desecration of something sacred. "Get out," I wanted to scream, but I was powerless, a silent witness to his madness. He reached the staircase, the camera bouncing with each step, the shadows lengthening as he ascended. "Are you hiding from me, Brittany?" he called, his voice echoing in the empty house, a chilling blend of mockery and longing. "You don't have to hide. I'm here for you." The words weren't just spoken, they were carved into the air, heavy with obsession, pulling me deeper into the dreamlike horror of the moment. In her bedroom, the camera lingered on the bed, its crisp white sheets perfectly made, a stark contrast to the chaos of his presence. Jason approached slowly, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the fabric, his fingers tracing the edge of the pillow. "This is where she sleeps," he whispered, his tone almost reverent, as if standing on holy ground. My skin crawled. The violation so personal, so grotesque, it felt like he was reaching through the screen to taint my own sense of safety. He turned to the closet, sliding open the doors to reveal rows of neatly hung clothes, his fingers grazing the fabrics, silk, cotton, sequins, as if they held her essence. "So close," he said, his breath hitching, his voice thick with a sick awe. "I can feel her." The camera shook, his excitement palpable, and I felt trapped in his mind, each word pulling me deeper into his delusion. This isn't real, I told myself, but the vividness of the feed, the clarity of his voice made it impossible to believe. He moved to the bathroom, the live stream showing marble countertops and a gleaming sink. Jason ran his hands along the surface, pausing to pick up a loofah, pressing it to his face as if it could bring him closer to her. "She used this," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, the words dripping with possession. My stomach twisted. The act so intimate it felt like a violation of my own boundaries. He opened the medicine cabinet, rifling through bottles, pulling out a perfume and spraying it into the air, stepping through the mist like a ritual. "This is hers," he said, his eyes wild, his movements frantic. The camera jerked as he returned to the bedroom, picking up a pillow from the bed, clutching it tightly to his chest as if it were Brittany herself. "I'll wait for you here," he murmured, sinking to the floor, rocking slightly, the pillow pressed against him. The live stream's comment section exploded. "What is this guy doing? Someone call the cops. This is insane." But I couldn't look away, my heart pounding, my mind screaming for it to end. Then a jolt. Voices, sharp and authoritative, shattered the tension. "Hands up!" The camera tilted wildly as Jason scrambled to his feet, his breath frantic. The pillow falling to the floor. Brittany's security team stormed in, their shouts filling the feed as they tackled him. The screen went black, the silence suffocating, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark glass. My hands shook, my breath uneven, as the reality of what I'd witnessed sank in. Later, I learned the police had arrested him for trespassing, vandalism, and stalking. Brittany wasn't home, thank God, but the damage was done. The footage haunted me, replaying in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't shake. Each time I saw a live stream notification, my heart raced, the memory of his voice. "I'm here for you, Brittany," echoing in my ears. That night wasn't just an invasion of her home. It was a glimpse into the darkness of obsession, a shadow that lingers long after the screen goes dark, waiting for its next chance to creep back into the light. It was a Tuesday night, and the city seemed to hold its breath. I sat on the porch, the cigarette's ember glowing faintly in the dark, its smoke curling into the cool air like a secret I couldn't keep. The street was quieter than usual, the distant hum of traffic fading into a stillness that felt almost sacred. I exhaled, watching the world slow down, believing for a moment that peace was possible. Then I saw him, Reggie, walking down the sidewalk, his familiar silhouette soft, under the streetlights. He nodded, a small gesture of warmth, the kind that made this neighborhood feel like home. But behind him, shadows moved. 5 figures, their laughter sharp like broken glass, trailed him into the night. My stomach twisted, a warning I didn't yet understand. Something was coming, something that would tear this quiet apart. The porch was my refuge after long days, a place where I could sit and let the world fade away. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, cracked sidewalks, faded paint on old houses, but it had a rhythm, a heartbeat I'd grown to love. Reggie was part of that. He was a quiet man, maybe in his 60s, with a gentle smile and a habit of greeting everyone he passed. He'd walk to his sister's place most nights, his steps steady, his presence a comforting. That night, he looked the same, hands in his pockets, head comfortable, moving with the ease of routine. I took another drag, the cigarette's heat grounding me, and let my eyes wander. That's when I noticed them. 5 women, young, maybe 16 or 17, walking a few steps behind him. They shoved each other, their voices carrying across the street, sharp and mocking. I told myself they were just kids being kids, but the way they moved, too close, too deliberate, felt wrong, like predators circling something they'd already marked. The night felt different, like it was holding a secret it couldn't wait to spill. I crushed the cigarette under my shoe, the faint hiss of my skin against wood grounding me for a moment. I stood, stretching my arms, trying to shake the unease that clung to me like damp air. Across the street, a dog barked, its voice sharp and frantic, then fell silent. I nodded to Reggie as he passed, his smile warm, and he reminded me of my father, who died years ago. his hands always gentle, his voice steady even in the worst times. I'd never told Reggie that, never thought it mattered. Now, watching him walk into the night, I wished I had. The women were closer now, their laughter slicing through the air, their shadows merging into a single, shapeless mass. I leaned against the porch railing, my fingers digging into the wood, my breath shallow. Something was wrong, but I couldn't name it yet. I stayed where I was, my cigarette burning low, staining my eyes. The women's laughter grew louder, echoing off the houses, and I leaned forward, watching closely. Reggie turned into the alley, the shortcut he always took to his sister's place. It was a narrow path, barely lit, flanked by high fences and dark looming walls. I'd walked it myself 100 times, never thinking twice. But tonight, the alley felt different, like it was waiting to swallow something whole. The women followed, their footsteps quickening, their voices dropping into a low, taunting hum. "Hey, you're slowing down," one of them called, her tone dripping with malice. Reggie paused, his scarf tensing, and turned to face them. I couldn't hear his words, but his hands were raised, palms open, as if trying to calm a storm he didn't see coming. "We're bored," another said, her voice cold, her smile visible even from where I sat. My heart began to race, a dull thud against my ribs. I should have stood up, shouted something, done anything, but I didn't. I just watched, frozen, as the alley became a stage for something unspeakable. The alley seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its shadows deeper, its air thicker. I stepped off the porch, my feet moving before my mind could catch up, drawn to the alley like a moth to a flame. The women's voices were clearer now, their words laced with venom that made my skin crawl. "What's in that bag, huh?" One of them taunted, her voice high and mocking. Reggie's response was soft, pleading, but it only fueled their cruelty. I peered around the corner, my heart pounding, my hands clammy against the fence. The streetlight cast a sickly yellow glow, illuminating the scene like a stage. Reggie was on one knee, his hands raised, his face etched with fear. The women circled him, their movements fluid, almost choreographed. I remembered a night years ago, when I was a kid, watching a group of older boys corner a stray cat in an alley like this. They'd laughed too, their voices sharp with excitement as they closed in. I'd run home, too scared to watch, but the cat's cries had followed me. Now, standing here, I felt that same fear, that same helplessness. But this wasn't a cat. This was Reggie. The air grew heavier, the night pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake. The women closed in, their laughter turning sharp, vicious. One of them lunged forward, snatching Reggie's bag from his hands. It hit the ground, spilling papers, a thermos, a few coins that glinted in the dim light. Reggie reached down, his voice trembling as he asked them to stop. That's when it happened. A girl pushed him. The woman, taller than the others, stepped forward and pushed him, the force sending him crashing into the wall. Reggie staggered, his hand flying to his back, his eyes wide with shock. The others laughed, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't right. They pushed him faster, their movements quick and brutal. They grabbed his jacket, yanking it off his shoulders. They kicked his legs, sending him crashing to the pavement. He tried to crawl away, his hands scraping against the stone, but they were relentless. A girl picked up a piece of broken concrete, her face blank, and brought it down on his back. The impact was dull, sickening, a sound that lodged itself in my chest. Reggie's cry was raw, desperate, but it only made them. My hands shook harder, the cigarette falling to ash, the porch staining my fingers. The ground shook me, its embers trembling. I should have moved. I wanted to scream, but my body betrayed me, rooted by a fear I felt I couldn't name. The alley was a blur of emotion, a nightmare unfolding in front of my eyes under the flicker of a dying streetlight. The women didn't stop. They kicked. They kicked Reggie's legs, his head, anywhere they could reach. Blood stained the ground beneath them, dark and slick, catching pooling in the light like he was spilled ink. One of them knelt beside him, kneeling beside him, searching through his pockets with quick hands, careless hands. Finding nothing, she moved away from his face, her fingers quick and cruel. Another woman stood back, her phone raised, recording every movement. "Keep going," she said, her voice shrill, egging the others over. Reggie's cries grew weaker, his body shaking with each blow. I remembered a story my uncle used to tell, about a man in his hometown beaten by a mob for no reason, left to die in a ditch. He'd told it with a shake of his head, a warning about the dangers in people. I'd never believed it could happen here, not in my house, not in my neighborhood. But now, watching him curled up into himself, his hands shaking against the ground, I saw the darkness, alive and hungry. My stomach twisted, turned sour, bile rising in my throat. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling numb, but I couldn't look away. I could feel it. Reggie's face was unrecognizable, a mess of blood and swelling skin, his eyes half open, staring, pleading for a mercy that would never come. As the women attacked, the world seemed to slow down, each moment carved into memory with brutal clarity. The tall girl's arm swung again, the concrete block crashing into her shoulder, the crack of breaking bone audible even from where I stood. He fell forward, his face scraping the pavement, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Blood poured from his mouth, pooling beneath him, its coppery scent mixing with the alley's damp, sour smell. The girl with the phone laughed, her voice high and manic, her camera flashing every blow. I wanted to run over to him, to pull him away, but my legs were heavy, my body betraying me. I saw my father again, lying in a hospital bed, his face pale, his hands cold. I'd stood there too, standing there, unable to save him, unable to do anything but watch. Now, history was repeating itself again, the alley a mirror reflecting of my failures. Reggie's eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, wide and desperate, and I felt a desperate scream rise in my throat, trapped behind my lips' clenched teeth. The women didn't see me, didn't care. They didn't care. They were lost in their own world, a place where pain was a game, where life meant nothing. The attack seemed to last forever, each moment stretching into eternity. The women's laughter filled the room, a sound that burrowed into my mind, drowning out screams. One of them stepped on his chest, her shoe crushing, leaving a dark imprint on his shirt. Another swung the concrete again, this time against his skull. The sound was different, sharper, final. Reggie's body fell limp, his hands dropping, his breath stopping. The silence stood over him, panting, breathing heavily, their faces flushed with something that wasn't guilt, wasn't remorse. One tossed his torn jacket onto his body, a careless gesture like they were discarding trash. "This is too easy," he said, his voice low and almost bored. The girl turned away. They turned and walked away, their laughter fading into the night, leaving Reggie behind, crumbled and crumpled on the cold pavement, broken thing in a world that didn't care. The cigarette was gone, its ash scattered across the ground. The porch shook me, trembling. My heart was pounding, my beating heart pounding so hard I felt it might break. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that I'd wake up and find him gone, walking away, nodding as he always did. But now, the blood in the alley, the silence, that followed told me otherwise. He was gone forever. I stayed there, staring into the darkness, my mind replaying what I'd seen. My body felt heavy, like it was sinking into the earth. The porch, into the ground, into the earth. I forced myself to move, stood up, my hands trembling, shaking as I dialed my phone 911. My voice trembled, the words trembling as they tumbled out in a rush. Something's happened in the alley. He's hurt, please hurry. I couldn't say more, couldn't admit that I'd seen it all and done nothing. The operator's voice was calm, distant, asking questions I couldn't answer. I hung up, my hands shaking, slick with sweat, and waited. The sirens came, grew louder, their lights painting the street in red and blue. Paramedics rushed into the alley, their faces grim as they knelt beside him. Police arrived, followed, their voices crackling with commands, their questions sharp and probing. I stayed in the shadow, my back leaning pressed against the wall of the house, shaking, unable to face them. They covered Reggie's body with a sheet, the whiteness of it fabric stark against the blood-stained pavement. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was sorry, but the words wouldn't come. All I could only do was watch, a cowardice haunted by my own silence. The days that followed were a haze of guilt and fear. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Reggie's face, his blood, his eyes, the blood. In the alley. The video appeared online, spread it, grainy but unmistakable, spreading like wildfire. I watched it once, my hands trembling, shaking, and vomited. The women's faces were everywhere, on the news channels, social media. Their eyes a chilling reminder of how young they were. People called them monsters, demons, but to me they were worse. They were monsters. Ordinary kids who'd turned into monsters, a man's life into a game. They'd taken Reggie's life. I kept seeing him again in my dreams, his eyes asking why I hadn't helped. I had no answer. The police arrested them, their sentences handed down in cold, clinical terms. One got 7 years, another 3 numbers. That meant nothing compared to the life they'd taken. I moved away, unable to stay in a place that felt like a graveyard. But the alley followed me, its shadows stretching into every darkened street, into every empty night. I left the city a broken man, carrying a ghost, a death like a weight around my neck. The new apartment was small, quiet, but it didn't matter. The alley was still there, in the shadows of my dreams, in the silence of empty nights. I whispered to Reggie's picture, one I'd found online. His smile warm, his eyes kind, whispering apologies he'd never hear. I told myself I'd be haunted forever, that I'd never escape the guilt. But deep down, I knew the truth was, the real horror wasn't just what I'd seen, but what I'd become. A witness to a monster, confessing it pass unchallenged. Reggie deserved better, and so did I. The memory that night clings to me like a shadow I can't outrun. It's a shadow that haunts me. I drive through new cities now, past quiet haunted streets that look too quiet, much like home. And I see Reggie. In every alley, every darkened corner. I see his face in every alley, in every shadow. I see the women too, their faces frozen in that moment of cruelty. Their laughter echoing a soundtrack to my nightmares. I volunteered at AA Community for a while, thinking it might ease my guilt, but it didn't. The kids there were different, hopeful, loud, alive, but I couldn't look at them without wondering which ones might grow up to be monsters. Which ones might be lost to the dark, that same darkness consumed them that took Reggie. I keep my distance, my world shrinking into the walls of an apartment. The hum of a TV too, the faint glow of my cigarette in the dark. My hands shake. Sometimes I think I can hear Reggie's voice, soft and forgiving, telling me to let it go. But I can't. I can't. The alley is part of me now, its blood and its silence woven into my soul. I didn't just witness a murder that night. I lost something vital, something human, and no amount of time, no distance can't give it back. The glow of my phone screen flickered in the dark, pulling me into a world I didn't understand. A world where my brother Jonah was no longer himself. His laughter, once warm and familiar, had turned hollow, echoing through our small apartment, as he scrolled endlessly through videos of her. Hawk Tua girl. Haley Welch, with her sly smile and catchy phrases, had taken over his life, her voice seeping into every corner of our home. "Look at her, Jenny, she's real. She gets us," he'd say, his eyes bright with a feverish glow, as if she were speaking directly to him through the screen. At first, I thought it was harmless, just another teenage obsession with a viral star. Her videos were everywhere. Billboards, trending hashtags, glowing on every phone in our town. She was a phenomenon, a larger-than-life figure who made people feel seen, connected. Jonah was no different, or so I thought, memorizing her catchphrases, mimicking her gestures, recreating her challenges in our backyard. "It's just a phase, let him have his fun," I told myself, brushing off the unease creeping into my chest. But deep down I felt it, a shadow growing behind his smile, something I couldn't name. Then came Hawk Tua coin. Jonah's eyes lit up when he showed me the promo video, a glossy montage of Haley Welch flanked by 2 crypto influencers, their voices promising wealth, freedom, a new life. "This isn't just money, Jenny," he said, his voice trembling with conviction. "It's a movement. She believes in us." He drained his savings, every cent he'd earned from late-night shifts at the diner. When that wasn't enough, he sold his gaming setup, his phone, even his old scooter, piling everything into the coin. "You're throwing away everything. Stop." This I wanted to scream, but his faith was unshakable, his eyes gleaming with a desperate hope. I couldn't reach him. Weeks passed and the coin surged, its value climbing to dizzying heights. Jonah's excitement was contagious, his laughter filling the house again. But then, overnight, it crashed. The website vanished, the influencers went silent, and Jonah's world collapsed. I found him in the living room one morning, staring at his laptop, his face pale, his hands trembling. "It's gone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Everything's gone." "Look at me, Jonah, we'll figure this out," I thought. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was lost, adrift in a sea of broken promises. The change was slow at first, like a crack spreading through glass. Jonah stopped leaving his room, stopped eating, stopped talking. His walls became a shrine to her. Screenshots of Hawk Tua's posts, coin ads, scribbled notes in shaky handwriting I couldn't decipher. At night I'd hear him pacing, muttering to himself, his voice low and feverish. "She'll come back, she'll fix this," he'd say, as if Haley Welch could hear him through the screen. One night I pushed open his door, and my breath caught. Jonah sat in front of his mirror, my makeup smeared across his face, red lipstick, streaking his lips, eyeliner smudged around his eyes, his hair tied back in a clumsy bun mimicking her signature style. "I'm loyal to you," he whispered to his reflection, his voice soft but intense, as if she were standing there. "Jonah, what are you doing?" I wanted to ask, but my voice stuck in my throat. His eyes met mine in the mirror, wild and unrecognizable, the brother I knew buried beneath a mask of obsession. "You don't understand, Jenny," he said, his lips twitching into a half-smile. "I'm not Jonah. I'm Hawk Tua." My stomach churned, a cold dread settling over me. I backed out, closing the door, my heart pounding as if I'd seen a stranger. The days that followed were a blur of fear and helplessness. Jonah's behavior grew erratic, his muttering louder, his eyes darting as if he saw her everywhere. He'd spend hours staring at his phone, refreshing her page, waiting for a sign. I tried to talk to him, to pull him back, but he was gone, lost in a world where Haley Welch was his savior. Then, one night, he disappeared. I found a note on the kitchen counter scrawled in jagged handwriting. "The world will remember me." My heart sank as I ran to his room. It was empty, my makeup scattered across the floor, a blood-stained razor blade glinting in the lamplight. "Jonah, where are you?" I thought, panic clawing at my chest. I followed a faint noise, a distant chant, to the park down the street. A crowd had gathered, their phones raised, recording. In the center on a bench stood Jonah, dressed in a glittery blouse and ripped jeans, smeared with red stains. His face was painted white with my foundation, his lips trembling under a smear of lipstick. "I am Hawk Tua!" he screamed, his voice raw, echoing through the night. "I'm here to save you all. Hawk Tua coin will rise again." "Stop, Jonah, come home," I wanted to scream, but my voice was lost in the crowd's laughter. The air grew heavy, the crowd's mockery turning to unease as Jonah's movements became frantic. He waved his arms, his eyes wild, scanning the faces as if searching for her. Then he pulled a knife from his pocket, its blade catching the streetlight. "Thiba." Laughter stopped, replaced by murmurs of panic. "You think this is funny?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "You don't believe me? You'll see." He slashed the air, the blade glinting, his movements erratic. "Put it down, Jonah, please," I thought, stepping forward, my heart racing. People backed away, their phones still recording, capturing every moment of his descent. "She's watching me," he screamed, pointing the knife at his reflection in a puddle. "She'll save me." The sirens grew closer, their wail cutting through the night. Jonah didn't notice, his eyes fixed on the puddle, whispering, "Hawk Tua, are you proud of me?" I pushed through the crowd, my voice trembling. "Jonah, please, put the knife down." For a moment he looked at me, his eyes softening, recognition flickering. "Jenny," he whispered, "do you see me now?" But before I could reach him, the police tackled him, pinning him to the ground. He fought, screaming her name, his voice a desperate howl that echoed in my ears long after they dragged him away. The videos went viral within hours, Jonah's breakdown plastered across every platform. Comments flooded in, cruel and mocking. "This guy's insane. Hawk Tua's ultimate fanboy." I stared at my phone, my hands shaking, as Haley Welch's account kept posting, her smile untouched, her fame unshaken. She never addressed, never acknowledged the boy who'd lost everything for her. Jonah was gone, locked away, his mind shattered, his life reduced to a trending hashtag. "You didn't see him. You didn't care," I thought, staring at her latest post, her face glowing under studio lights. The world moved on, but I couldn't. Every night, I see his face smeared with makeup, his eyes wild with a belief that destroyed him. Sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I hear his voice whispering her name, as if she's still there, watching us both. This story is based on the real-life case of Haley Welch, known as the Hawk Tua Girl, who gained viral fame in June 2024 from a humorous interview clip. She launched the Hawk Tua meme coin in December 2024, which surged to a market cap of nearly $500 million before collapsing, leaving investors like Jonah with nothing. Lawsuits followed, alleging fraud, but Welch, untouched by the legal fallout, expressed willingness to cooperate while her fame continued to grow. The laughter echoed across the Monon High Bridge, sharp and free, cutting through the heavy February air. Abby's teasing voice rang in my ears as I stumbled over a loose plank, nearly tripping, my hands flailing for balance. Careful, clumsy, she called, her grin wide, her eyes sparkling under the pale afternoon sun. Libby lagged behind, her phone raised, snapping photos of the rusted tracks stretching into the horizon. "One more for the gram!" she shouted, her voice bright with mischief. The bridge was our place, a rickety stretch of history where we could be loud, silly ourselves, far from the suffocating halls of school or the prying eyes of parents. That day, though, the air felt different, thicker, like a storm was brewing beneath the clear sky. I brushed it off, blaming the chill, but something deep in my chest stirred, a quiet warning I couldn't name. "This moment won't last," it whispered. But I ignored it, lost in the warmth of my friends' laughter. We crossed the bridge, our footsteps thudding against the weathered wood, the creek below glinting dark and sluggish. Libby tucked her phone away, rolling her eyes at Abby's teasing. "You'll thank me when we're famous," she said, her smile infectious. I laughed, the sound fading as my gaze drifted to the far end of the bridge. A man stood there, stocky, his blue jacket blending into the shadows of the trees. His cap was pulled low, his face obscured, but his stillness was unnerving, like a statue carved from the forest itself. "He's just a hiker," I told myself, but my pulse quickened, my skin prickling under my jacket. "Creepy guy alert," Abby muttered, her voice low, barely audible over the wind. Libby glanced back, her smile faltering. "Let's just go," she said, her hand brushing mine, urging us forward. We hurried off the bridge, our steps quickening, trying to act casual, but the weight of his gaze followed us, heavy, unyielding. His boots hit the wood behind us, deliberate, each step a hammer against my nerves. I stole a glance over my shoulder. His head was tilted, his eyes hidden, but his movements were purposeful, closing the distance. "Hey!" he called, his voice rough, slicing through the air. My heart lurched, my legs freezing for a split second. "Down the hill!" he barked, pulling something from his jacket. The glint of metal caught the light. A gun. Libby grabbed Abby's hand. Abby clutched mine, and we stumbled down the steep trail, branches clawing at our faces, the earth slippery under our feet. "Run. Don't stop," my mind screamed, but my body felt heavy, each step a battle against the panic choking me. The crunch of his boots followed, relentless, growing louder. Libby's breath was ragged, her eyes wide with fear as she glanced back. "What does he want?" Abby whispered, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer, my throat dry, my mind racing with images of news headlines, missing girls, shallow graves. The trail ended at the creek, its dark water lapping at the muddy bank. He was on us in seconds, his gun raised, his face now visible. Ordinary, almost forgettable. But his eyes burned with something cold, something inhuman. "On your knees," he ordered, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. We dropped to the ground, the mud cold and sticky, soaking through my jeans, chilling my skin. Libby's hands shook, tears streaming down her face as she begged, "Please, I'll do anything, just..." Her words cut off as he grabbed her hair, yanking her back with a force that made my stomach twist. A knife appeared in his hand, its jagged blade glinting in the fading light. In one brutal motion, he dragged it across her throat. Blood sprayed, hot and bright, splattering my face, its warmth shocking against my skin. Libby's eyes bulged, her mouth opening and closing, her hands clawing at the wound as blood gushed, pooling around her in the mud. Her legs kicked, her shoes scraping the earth, her body fighting a battle it couldn't win. She collapsed, her lifeless gaze fixed on the sky, frozen in terror. Abby screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through me, her hands scrabbling in the mud as she tried to stand. He was faster, grabbing her, slamming her back to the ground. "Pretty little thing," he sneered, his voice calm, almost playful as he traced the knife along her cheek, leaving a thin red line. "Please," Abby sobbed, her voice breaking. "Don't." He mocked her, his tone chilling. "You think begging will save you?" The knife pressed under her chin, tilting her head up, blood trickling down her neck. Then, with a savage thrust, he drove the blade into her stomach. Abby's scream was agony itself, her body convulsing as blood soaked her hoodie, spreading like ink. She turned to me, her eyes wide, desperate. "Run!" she gasped, blood bubbling from her lips, her voice wet, weak, her head slumped, her body still twitching as life drained away. "Run. Now." My legs moved before my mind caught up, propelled by terror, by the need to survive. I plunged into the brush, branches tearing at my face, my lungs burning as I ran. His boots crunched behind me, the sound fading as Abby's screams grew distant, then stopped. I tripped, my palms sinking into the wet earth, Libby's blood still warm on my hands. I gagged, forcing myself up, the woods closing in, an endless maze of shadows. My breath was ragged, my chest aching, but I didn't stop, not until I burst onto the road. Headlights blinded me, a car skidding to a halt. I collapsed, my screams incoherent, my body shaking. "He's got them!" I managed, the words spilling out raw and desperate. The driver, a woman, stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling as she called for help. The world blurred, the sound of sirens distant, unreal, as if I were trapped in a dream that wouldn't. And the next 48 hours were a haze of hospital lights and police questions. When I came to, the news hit like a blade. Abby and Libby were gone, their bodies found near the creek, mutilated beyond recognition. Libby's phone held a grainy image of him, a shadowy figure on the bridge, and a recording of his voice. Down the hill that echoed through our town, a ghost that wouldn't rest. Richard Allen was arrested years later, a man we'd passed in the grocery store. His face so ordinary it made the truth even crueler. I thought justice would bring relief, but it didn't. Their screams haunt my dreams, the knife's glint, the blood's warmth. Their terrified eyes burned into my soul. Sometimes in the quiet of night I hear his voice, low and steady, whispering down the hill. It's a sound I'll carry forever, a reminder that evil doesn't hide in the dark. It walks among us, waiting for its moment to strike. The night was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's hiding something sharp. I was sprawled on my bed, phone glowing with endless videos, when a flicker of movement outside my window caught my eye. Shadows danced across the lawn, quick and deliberate, heading toward Madison's house next door. My heart skipped, a cold prickle running down my neck. Madison was my best friend, the one who knew my secrets, my fears, my everything. She was supposed to be safe, tucked away in her room, fairy lights glowing like a promise of forever. But those shadows, they weren't right. I pressed my face to the glass, my breath fogging the pain, and watched them slip into her yard. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and it was coming for her. Madison and I had grown up together, two kids sharing laughter and late-night talks in this sleepy Georgia town. Her house was my second home, her room a sanctuary of fairy lights, posters and the faint scent of vanilla candles. We'd spend hours there, planning our futures, giggling over nothing, promising we'd never drift apart. The night I'd been at her place earlier, eating cookies she'd baked with her mom, teasing her about her messy handwriting. She'd laughed, her eyes bright, her warmth filling the room. Now as I sat in the dark, the memory of her smile felt like a lifeline. I grabbed my phone, my fingers hovering over her number, but something stopped me. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing against my chest, urging me to look outside again. I slipped off the bed, my bare feet cold against the floor, and crept to the window. The shadows were gone, but the unease lingered, a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine from Madison's garden, a sweetness that felt out of place against the growing dread in my chest. Stood on my porch, my eyes fixed on her house, the glow of her window like a beacon in the dark. Madison was more than a friend. She was family, the one who'd held my hand through my dad's funeral, who'd stayed up with me when nightmares kept me awake. I remembered a night last summer, sitting on her roof counting stars, promising we'd leave this town together one day. That promise felt fragile now, like it could shatter with a single wrong move. I took a step toward her yard, my sneakers sinking into the damp grass, my breath shallow. The neighborhood was asleep, the houses dark, the silence broken only by the faint hum of a distant car. I told myself I was overreacting, that the shadows were just kids pulling a prank. But deep down I knew better. Something was coming, and it wasn't going to let either of us go. I pulled on a hoodie, my hands trembling, and stepped outside. The night was cool, the grass damp under my feet, the streetlights casting long, wavering shadows. Madison's house was dark except for the soft glow of her bedroom window, the fairy lights outlining her silhouette. I moved closer, crouching, behind the bushes, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear. That's when I saw them. 3 figures inside her room, their shapes sharp against the warm light. Jacobine Brown, Justice Smith, and Yusa Mathis. I knew them from school, guys with reputations for trouble. Their names whispered in hallways like warnings. Jacobine stood closest to Madison, his posture tense, his voice low but sharp. I couldn't make out the words, but Madison's face was pale, her arms crossed, her body rigid. She wasn't scared, not yet, but she was angry, her voice rising in defiance. My breath caught, my hands gripping the bush, leaves digging into my palms. I wanted to run to her, to scream for help, but my body was frozen, pinned by a fear I couldn't name. The room felt like a stage, the fairy lights casting an eerie glow over the scene. Jacobine's voice grew louder, his words cutting through the night. "You think you can just walk away?" he said, his tone cold, his eyes glinting with something dark. Madison stepped back, her hands raised, her voice steady but trembling. "I don't know what you're talking about, just leave." Justice muttered something, his face tense, but Jacobine silenced him with a glare. Yusa stood by the door, his hands in his pockets, his eyes darting nervously. I pressed myself lower, my knees sinking into the damp earth, my heart racing. I remembered a story Madison had told me weeks ago, about a fight with Jacobine at a party. Something about a debt or a promise she'd refused to keep. I'd laughed it off, told her he was all talk. But now, watching him tower over her, I wasn't so sure. Jacobine reached into his jacket, pulling out a gun, its metal catching the light like a blade. My stomach dropped, a scream trapped in my throat. Madison froze, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Just go." I crouched lower, the bushes scratching my arms, their thorns drawing thin lines of blood. Madison's room was a world I knew by heart. The soft rug, the desk cluttered with notebooks, the fairy lights that made everything feel safe. But now, it was a trap. The lights casting long shadows that twisted like fingers reaching for her. Jacobine's voice was a low growl, his words laced with a bitterness I couldn't place. "You owe us," he said, his hands clenched, his body coiled like a spring. Madison laughed, a sharp, nervous sound, her eyes darting to the door. "Owe you? For what? Get out before I call someone. Her bravery made my chest ache, but it was a spark in a storm, too small to stop what was coming. I remembered a story my dad used to tell, about a friend who'd gotten mixed up with the wrong people, paid for it with his life. I thought it was just a cautionary tale, but now, watching Madison stand her ground, I saw the truth in it. The world was full of debts, and some were paid in blood. The air grew thick, the scent of wet grass and fear filling my lungs. Jacobin stepped closer, the gun steady in his hand, his face twisting into something unrecognizable. "You think you're better than us?" He spat, his voice low and venomous. Madison shook her head, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she backed against the wall. "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Justice shifted, his voice low. "This isn't worth it, man." But Jacobin didn't listen. His eyes were locked on Madison, his grip tightening on the gun. I wanted to move, to break the window, to do anything. But my body was heavy, my mind screaming at me to stay hidden. I remembered my mom's voice years ago, telling me about a robbery she'd witnessed, how she'd stayed silent, too scared to act. I'd promised myself I'd never be like that, but now, crouching in the dark, I was her, paralyzed by the weight of my own fear. Jacobin raised the gun, his finger on the trigger, his face calm, almost serene. Madison's eyes met his, wide with terror, her lips moving in a silent plea. The world seemed to stop, the night holding its breath. Then it happened, a flash of light, a deafening roar that split the silence. Madison staggered back, blood erupting. From her forehead, a violent spray of red that splattered the wall behind her. Her body crumpled, hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Her eyes wide and lifeless, staring at the ceiling. Blood pooled beneath her, soaking into the carpet, its coppery scent mixing with the vanilla of her candles. I gagged, my hands covering, my mouth, my vision blurring with tears. Jacobin stood over her, the gun still in his hand, his chest heaving, his face blank. "She had it coming," he muttered, his voice hollow. Justice cursed, his voice shaking, while Yusa paced, his hands pulling at his hair. "No one was supposed to die," Yusa said, his voice breaking. Jacobin wiped the gun with his sleeve, his movements slow, deliberate, like he was erasing a mistake. My body trembled, my nails digging into my palms, drawing blood. I wanted to scream, to run to her, but the horror pinned me in place, a witness to a nightmare I couldn't escape. As Madison fell, the room seemed to collapse around her, the fairy lights flickering like they were mourning her. Blood sprayed across her bed, her posters, her life, turning the familiar into something grotesque. Her hands twitched, a final desperate reach for something she'd never grasp again. I choked on a sob, my hands pressed so hard against my mouth, I tasted blood. Jacobin's face was a mask, his eyes empty, his breath steady as if he'd done this before. Justice paced, his hands shaking, muttering to himself, while Yusa stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes locked on the blood pooling at his feet. The scent of it was overwhelming, sharp and metallic, mixing with the faint sweetness of Madison's candles. I saw my dad's funeral again. The way his coffin had looked too small, too final. I'd stood there silent, promising I'd never let someone I love slip away again. But here I was, failing Madison, failing myself, watching her life drain into the carpet while I did nothing. They didn't stay long. Jacobin climbed out the window, his boots heavy on the grass, Justice and Yusa following, their voices low and urgent. I stayed hidden, my breath ragged, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. The fairy lights flickered, casting a soft glow over Madison's body, her blood a dark stain against the warmth of her room. I crawled back to my house, my hands shaking, my mind replaying the image of her falling, the blood, the silence. I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, unable to move, unable to think. The next morning, Madison's mom's screams shattered the quiet, raw, and piercing, cutting through the neighborhood like a blade. I watched from my window as police arrived, their lights flashing, their voices sharp. They carried Madison out, a white sheet covering her body, a final goodbye to the girl who'd been my world. I couldn't keep silent. I wrote a letter, my hands trembling, detailing everything I'd seen, and left it at the police station. I don't know if it was my words or their investigation, but they arrested Jacobine, Justice, and Yusa days later. I didn't go to Madison's funeral. I couldn't face her mom, couldn't look at the empty space where she should have been. Instead, I sat in my room. The letter's words burned into my mind, a confession that felt like a betrayal. I'd written it in the dark, my hands shaking, the pen slipping in my sweaty grip. Every word was a weight, a truth I couldn't carry alone. But it wasn't enough. Nothing would bring her back. Not the arrests, not the trials, not the tears I cried when no one was watching. I kept a photo of us, taken last summer, our faces flushed from laughing, the world bright and endless. Now it was a relic, a reminder of what I'd lost. I'd hear her voice sometimes, soft and teasing, calling my name in the quiet of the night. But when I opened my eyes, she was gone, and I was alone with the guilt that would never leave. The aftermath was a blur of guilt and grief. Jacobine showed no remorse, his eyes cold in the courtroom, while Justice and Yusa seemed hollow, haunted by their own actions. I moved away, unable to stay in a place where every street, every light, reminded me of her. But Madison's face follows me, her smile, her blood, her lifeless eyes. I see her in my dreams, standing in her room, asking why I didn't save her. I have no answer, only the weight of my silence, my failure. The letter was too little, too late, a coward's attempt at redemption. Her blood is on my hands, not because I pulled the trigger, but because I watched and did nothing. I live with that truth, a shadow that grows darker with every passing day, a reminder that some wounds never heal, some ghosts never leave. Years have passed, but Madison's death is a wound that never closes. I live in a new city now, a place where the streets are loud and the nights are short, but it doesn't matter. She's there in every flicker of light, every shadow that moves too quickly. I work a desk job, keep my head down, try to forget. But the memories are relentless. Her blood, her eyes, the way the fairy lights dimmed as she fell. I volunteer at a youth center sometimes, hoping to make up for my silence. But the kids' laughter sounds too much like hers, their faces too much like the ones I failed. I keep her photo in my wallet, hidden but always there, a reminder of the promise I broke. Some nights I dream of her room, the fairy lights glowing, her smile warm. But the dream always shifts, the blood always comes, and I wake up gasping, my hands reaching for a friend who's gone forever. Madison's ghost is my punishment, a shadow I'll carry until I'm gone, a truth I can't outrun. The new city never feels like home, not the way Madison's house did. I walk its streets, avoiding alleys, avoiding shadows, but they find me anyway. I see her in strangers' faces, in the glow of neon signs, in the quiet moments when the world slows down. I tried therapy once, thinking it might loosen the grip of her memory, but the words felt empty, the sessions a betrayal of what we'd shared. I keep a journal now, writing to her, telling her about the life I'm trying to live, the person I'm trying to be. But the pages are stained with guilt, with the truth that I could have saved her, that I should have been braver. I visit her grave sometimes when I'm back in Georgia, leaving flowers by the stone that bears her name. The wind carries her laugh. Or maybe it's just my mind, desperate for forgiveness I don't deserve. Madison's death rewrote me, turned me into someone who flinches at shadows, who listens for gunshots in the silence, who knows that love isn't enough to save anyone. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, cutting through the warm haze of a Florida morning. I was in the living room, the newspaper spread across my lap, coffee cooling on the table, while Marlene hummed in the kitchen, her hands wrist-deep in soapy water. The birds chirped outside, the sun spilling through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. It was just another day, or so I thought. Marlene wiped her hands on her apron, her footsteps light as she moved to the door. Who could it be this? Early? I wondered, barely glancing up. The door creaked open and then silence. A heavy, unnatural stillness swallowed the house, as if the world held its breath. My chest tightened, a prickle of unease crawling up my neck. Then a sound shattered the quiet. A single deafening shot that tore through my ears, my heart, my life. I dropped the paper, my legs moving before my mind could catch up, and ran to the door. Marlene, oh God, Marlene, my mind screamed as I rounded the corner. There she was, my wife, crumpled on the floor, blood pooling beneath her, a dark, glistening stain spreading across the carpet. Her face, her beautiful face, was gone, reduced to a gaping wound, her eye socket a hollow mess of torn flesh. Her lips twitched as if trying to speak, but only a faint, rattling breath escaped. And standing above her, motionless, was the clown. Its painted face was too perfect. The red lips curved into a wide, grotesque smile that seemed to mock the horror at its feet. Black eyes, empty as voids, stared through me, unblinking, unfeeling. It held a bouquet of flowers in one hand, 2 balloons, one red, one white, bobbing in the other, their strings swaying gently in the morning breeze. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the clown's presence drained the life from the room. Run, scream, do something, I told myself, but my body was frozen, my eyes locked on that unnatural grin. My son Joe stumbled into the hall, his scream piercing the silence as he saw his mother. He slipped in her blood, his hands shaking as he reached for her, trying to hold her ruined face together, his fingers slick with red. Mom, please," he sobbed, his voice breaking, but she was slipping away, her breath slowing, fading. The clown didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, its smile unchanging. Then, as if the moment were nothing more than a chore, it turned, walked down the driveway and climbed into a white car. The balloons floated above, drifting higher, disappearing into the bright sky, leaving me with the image of that painted face burned into my soul. The police came quickly, their radios crackling, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene. "Robbery. Gone wrong," one officer muttered, but the words felt hollow, like a lie I couldn't swallow. This wasn't random, I thought, my hands trembling as I stood in the doorway, watching them cover Marlene's body with a sheet. The house smelled of blood and gunpowder, the scent clinging to my skin, seeping into my lungs. Neighbors whispered, their eyes darting toward me, their voices low. His business wasn't clean, they said. Maybe he had enemies. The accusations stung, but I barely heard them. My mind was trapped in that moment. The clown's grin, Marlene's blood, Joe's screams. I grieved in a haze, drowning in whiskey, haunted by the echo of that gunshot. Every night I'd close my eyes and see her face, not as it was in life, but as it was in death, broken, unrecognizable. The police found no leads, no suspects. The killer was a ghost, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. Then there was Sheila. She'd been in my life before Marlene's death. A secret I buried deep, a mistake I told myself meant nothing. It started as a fleeting thrill, stolen glances at work, late-night talks that went too far. It's nothing. It'll pass. I'd thought, but Sheila wanted more. She'd look at me with those sharp, hungry eyes, her voice soft but insistent. After Marlene died, she became my anchor, pulling me from the darkness. We grew closer, our bond deepening in the shadow of my grief. We fell in love, or so I believed, building a new life together. We married, opened a restaurant, and for a time I thought I could heal. Sheila made me feel safe, her laughter chasing away the nightmares. But the past has a way of clawing its way back. Years later, a detective showed up at our door, his face grim, holding a file that would unravel everything. "We have new evidence," he said. "DNA, forensic advancements." My stomach dropped as he spoke the name. Sheila Keene Warren. My wife. The woman I'd loved, trusted, built a future with. She was the clown. The truth was a knife, twisting deeper with every word. Sheila had planned it, every detail. She'd bought the clown costume, the flowers, the balloons, and stood at our door that morning, her face hidden behind that painted grin. She'd pulled the trigger, blowing Marlene's face apart, and walked away as if it were nothing. At the trial, I sat in a daze, my mind replaying every moment we'd shared. Sheila sat across the courtroom, calm, unruffled, her eyes meeting, mine without a trace of remorse. "I hated that woman," she said, her voice cold, deliberate. "You were mine, Michael, always mine." Her words echoed, each one a blow, as I realized the depth of her betrayal. She'd smiled at me, kissed me, built a life with me, all while carrying the weight of Marlene's blood on her hands. When they read her sentence, 12 years, a mere slap for taking a life, she smiled again, that same wide, unnatural grin, as if she still held power over me. "You can't escape her," my mind whispered, and I felt her presence, a shadow I'd never outrun. Now I live with the wreckage. The house is empty, the restaurant sold, Joe distant, his eyes hollow with a pain I can't reach. Every night I wake, drenched in sweat, the clown's face looming in my dreams, those black eyes, that twisted smile, Sheila's smile. The balloons haunt me, their red and white shapes floating in my mind, a reminder of the day my world ended. I see her in every shadow, hear her laughter in the wind. You let her in, you didn't see, I tell myself. The guilt, a weight I'll carry forever. I kissed the lips that planned Marlene's death, held the hands that held the gun. Some nights, when the house is too quiet, I feel her watching, her grin waiting in the dark. The Marlene Warren case, a decades-long mystery, finally saw justice in 2023, when Sheila Keene Warren was sentenced for second-degree murder. But for me, there's no justice, only the endless echo of that morning, and the clown that stole my life. This story is based on the real-life murder of Marlene Warren, shot in 1990 by a clown at her Florida home. Sheila Keene Warren, her husband's mistress, was linked to the crime through DNA in 2017, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 12 years. A chilling tale of deception and delayed justice. The roar of the crowd hit me like a tidal wave, a pulsing energy that made the walls of the arena hum. It was New Year's Eve 2017, and I was working security for Katy Perry's Witness Tour, a last-minute gig that felt like a badge of honor. The air crackled with excitement, lights flashing, music pounding, fans screaming her name in a frenzy of adoration. I stood near the stage, my eyes scanning the sea of glitter-covered faces, searching for anything out of place. Most fans were harmless, caught up in the magic of the night, but something in my gut told me to stay sharp. Trouble doesn't announce itself, I thought, my fingers brushing the baton at my side. That's when I saw him. A tall man, mid-30s, standing near the edge of the crowd, his plain clothes stark against the sequined chaos around him. His face was pale, his eyes dark and unblinking, fixed on Katie as she danced under the spotlights. He wasn't cheering, wasn't moving, just staring, his lips twitching with words I couldn't hear. My skin prickled, a cold unease settling in my chest. I nudged another guard, nodding toward him. See that guy? Something's off. The guard glanced over, his brow furrowing. Creepy but probably harmless, right? I shrugged, wanting to believe it, but the man's gaze was too intense, too focused, like he was seeing something the rest of us couldn't. Don't overthink it, I told myself, but my eyes kept drifting back to him, tracking his stillness in the chaotic crowd. As the concert ended and fans began to disperse, relief washed over me. The man was gone, swallowed by the exodus. I figured he'd left, just another face in the crowd. But as the crew packed up and Katie's team moved backstage, the air shifted. The arena grew too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears, making every sound feel like a warning. I was doing a final sweep of the hallway leading to Katie's dressing room when I saw it. A smear of red lipstick on the wall, trailing downward in a jagged streak, ending in a small, bloody handprint. My stomach twisted, my pulse quickening. This isn't right. I radioed for backup, my voice steady but tight. But before anyone could respond, a faint noise stopped me cold. A metallic scrape, sharp and deliberate, coming from the dressing room. Approached the door, my heart pounding, each step heavier than the last. The hallway seemed to stretch, the fluorescent lights flickering, casting long shadows that danced like specters. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of roses from a bouquet left somewhere nearby, but beneath it was something sour, something wrong. I pushed the door open slowly, my hand hovering over my baton, expecting chaos. But the room was pristine, makeup neatly arranged on the vanity, costumes hung on a rack, the soft glow of a mirror casting a warm light. Then I saw him. He was crouched in the corner, half hidden in shadow, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His fingers traced the handle of a makeup brush, stroking it with a tenderness that made my skin crawl. His lips moved, whispering words I couldn't make out, his eyes fixed on the mirror as if it held her reflection. "Get out now," my mind screamed, but duty kept me rooted. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than intended, cutting through the silence. "You're not supposed to be here." He didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his gaze to the mirror, where red lipstick scrawled a chilling message. "She belongs to me." My breath caught, the words searing into my mind, their meaning twisting like a knife. "Stand up," I ordered, stepping closer, my hand gripping the baton. He rose, his movements fluid, almost mechanical, his eyes never leaving the mirror. "She's waiting for me," he said softly, his voice trembling with conviction. "She called me here." My skin crawled, his words pulling me into a dreamlike haze as if reality itself was fraying. "You need to leave," I said, my voice firm, reaching for my radio. But before I could signal, he lunged, his body slamming into mine with unnatural force. We crashed into the vanity, glass shattering, perfume bottles scattering across the floor, their sweet scent mingling with the metallic tang of fear. He grabbed a shard of glass, swinging it wildly, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "You don't understand," he screamed, his voice raw, desperate. "She's mine. She's always been mine. I fought to restrain him, my arms straining against his unnatural strength, as if obsession itself fueled him. His breath was hot against my face, his words a frantic chant of Katie's name, each syllable a violation. I twisted his arm, forcing the glass from his hand, but he clawed at me, his nails digging into my skin. Hold him down, I told myself, my muscles burning as I pinned him to the floor. 2 other guards burst in, their shouts filling the room as they tackled him, his body thrashing like a trapped animal. Even as they restrained him, he didn't stop, his screams echoing down the hall. "She's mine!" The police arrived minutes later, cuffing him, his face twisted in defiance. In his jacket pocket, they found a notebook, pages filled with rambling letters to Katie, not love notes, but dark fantasies of rescuing her, of a life together. The final page chilled me to the eye. Oh, tonight is the night we'll be together, scrawled in shaky ink beside a crude sketch of her dressing room. Every detail eerily accurate. As they dragged him away, he turned to me, his lips curling into a grin. "You can't stop destiny," he said, his voice calm, certain. "She'll come for me." The rest of the night blurred. Katie finished the show, her composure unshaken. But I was unraveling. The arena felt different, every shadow a threat, every open door a trap. I stayed in security, but the job was never the same. Every crowd held a potential predator, every cheer a hidden menace. His face haunted me. That grin burned into my memory, his words replaying in the quiet moments. "She belongs to me." Sometimes when I heard Katie's music, I saw that notebook, those letters, the lipstick on the mirror. The police said his name was Pavel Yursky, a man who'd followed her across 6 cities, slipping through cracks, lingering in shadows. But to me, he was something else. A reminder that obsession doesn't just watch from afar. It creeps closer, waits for its moment, and leaves a stain that never fades, lurking in the corners of your mind long after the lights go out. The call came in the dead of night, a voice crackling through the radio, pulling me from a restless sleep. "Double homicide, 722 North Elm Drive," it said, cold and clipped, like death was just another Tuesday. I drove through Beverly Hills. The streets too perfect, too quiet, hiding something rotten beneath their polished surface. When I reached the Menendez mansion, its white walls glowed under the floodlights, a palace-turned tomb. I stepped inside, and the air hit me, thick with blood, gunpowder, and something sweeter, sicker, like decay, already setting in. The living room was a slaughterhouse, bodies torn apart, blood painting the walls like a scream frozen in time. This wasn't just murder. This was rage, raw and unstoppable, and it was waiting for me to look closer. The mansion loomed over me, its grandeur a mockery of the horror within. I'd seen death before, too many times, but nothing like this. The air was heavy, clinging to my skin, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the faint burn of spent shells. I moved through the foyer, my boots sticking to the marble floor, each step echoing in the silence. The living room was ahead, its doors open like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I braced myself, but nothing could prepare me for what I found. Jose Menendez was slumped on the couch, his head barely recognizable, a gaping wound where his face should have been. Blood and brain matter dripped onto the cushions, pooling on the Persian rug, its intricate patterns now a canvas of gore. Kitty Menendez lay sprawled nearby, her body twisted, her limbs bent at angles that spoke of desperation. Her face was gone, reduced to a pulpy mess, her eyes empty sockets staring at nothing. The room smelled of death, sharp and overwhelming, a scent that burrowed into my lungs and stayed there. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, my mind struggling to process the sheer brutality of it all. The lawn was a chaos of uniforms and flashing lights, but it felt distant, like a scene from someone else's life. I leaned against my car, the metal cold against my back, trying to shake the image of Jose and Kitty's bodies. The air was sharp with the scent of grass and exhaust, the night pressing down like a weight I couldn't lift. I'd been a cop for 15 years, seen things that would break most people, but this was different. The Menendez mansion wasn't just a crime scene. It was a wound, bleeding secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. I remembered a story my old partner used to tell, about a house in the valley where a family had died, their perfect lives hiding a darkness no one saw coming. He'd said some homes are cursed, not by ghosts, but by the people who live in them. Standing here, watching the paramedics wheel out the bodies, I felt that curse heavy and alive, wrapping its fingers around my heart. Outside, the night was alive with flashing lights, the chatter of radios, the low murmur of officers trying to make sense of the chaos. I stepped onto the lawn, needing air, needing distance. That's when I saw them, Lyle and Eric Menendez, the sons, stumbling toward the scene. Lyle was older, his face pale, his hair disheveled, his hands clawing at his scalp as if he could tear the grief out. Eric was younger, thinner, his body shaking with sobs, his knees buckling as he collapsed onto the grass. Their cries were raw, piercing, filling the night with a pain that felt almost theatrical. "They're dead," Lyle said, his voice breaking, his eyes wide and glistening. Eric buried his face in his hands, his nails digging into his cheeks, leaving red marks. I watched them, my instincts prickling. Something was off, the way Lyle's sobs would stop abruptly, his eyes darting to gauge our reactions, the way Eric's tears seemed practiced, too perfect. I'd seen grief before, and this wasn't it. This was something else, something calculated, hiding behind their tears. I asked what happened, my voice steady despite the unease in my gut. "We went to the movies," Lyle said, his breath hitching. "When we came back, oh God, they were gone." His words were right, but his eyes weren't. They were sharp, watching, waiting. The days after the murders were a blur of paperwork and sleepless nights. I'd sit in my office, the fluorescent lights buzzing, staring at crime scene photos until my eyes burned. Jose's shattered skull, Kitty's mangled face. They were etched into my mind, a gallery of horror I couldn't close. The mansion stayed with me too, its silence louder than any scream. I'd walk its rooms in my dreams, the blood still fresh, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I interviewed neighbors, friends, business associates, but they gave me nothing. Just praise for Jose's ambition, pity for Kitty's loneliness. The brothers were untouchable, their alibis tight, their grief a wall I couldn't breach. I remembered my first murder case, a young woman killed by her husband, his tears so convincing I'd almost believed him. I'd learned then that pain can be a mask, hiding truths too ugly to face. Now, watching Lyle and Eric move through their parents' world, I saw that mask again, and it terrified me. The investigation began in a fog of dead ends. No forced entry, no witnesses, no suspects. The mansion was a fortress, its security untouched, its secrets locked inside. I walked its halls in the days that followed, the silence oppressive, the walls whispering of a family unraveling. Jose was a media mogul, a man of power and control, his name synonymous with success. Kitty was his shadow, elegant but distant, her life a series of charity galas and quiet drinks. Their sons were golden boys, tennis stars, Ivy League hopefuls, but the cracks were there if you looked close. I found photos in the study, Lyle and Eric as kids, their smiles forced, their eyes hollow. I remembered a case from years ago, a family in Pasadena torn apart by secrets, the father's iron grip hiding sins no one dared name. I'd been young then, green, unable to see the truth until it was too late. Now, standing in the Menendez home, I felt that same dread, that sense of something buried waiting to be unearthed. But the brothers gave us nothing, just tears, alibis, and a story that didn't quite fit. Weeks passed and the case grew cold. The media swarmed, turning the murders into a spectacle, but we had no leads. Then the brothers started spending. Lyle bought a Porsche, its red paint gleaming like fresh blood. Eric hired a tennis coach, his lessons costing more than my yearly salary. They dined at restaurants where a single meal could feed a family for a month, their laughter loud, their grief forgotten. I watched them from a distance, my stomach churning. This wasn't mourning. This was arrogance, the kind that comes when you think you've won. I dug deeper, following their money, their movements, but it wasn't enough. The truth stayed hidden, taunting me, until it didn't. A woman named Judalon Smith came forward, her voice trembling, her eyes haunted. She was the mistress of Dr. Jerome Oziel, the brother's therapist, and she had a story that changed everything. Eric had confessed, she said, his words spilling out in a session, raw and unfiltered. He and Lyle had killed their parents, planned it, executed it, because of what Jose had done to them, what Kitty had allowed. The confession was a door swinging open, revealing a darkness I hadn't imagined. Eric's words, relayed through Judalon, were a descent into hell. He spoke of nights when Jose would enter his room, a shadow in the dim light, his hand heavy, his voice a low threat. The abuse began when Eric was a child, relentless, a secret that crushed him under its weight. Lyle's story was worse. Years of beatings, of bruises hidden under expensive clothes, of a father who laughed at his pain. Kitty knew, Eric said, but she did nothing, her eyes glazed with alcohol, her heart closed to her son's suffering. The rage built, a fire that consumed them, until it exploded that night in the living room. They'd bought shotguns, planned every detail, waited until their parents were still. Jose's face, Eric said, was the last thing he saw before the first shot, a look of shock turning to horror. Kitty tried to run, her screams filling the house, but they didn't stop. They fired until the room was a ruin, until their parents were nothing but blood and bone. I listened to Judalon, my hands clenched, my mind reeling. The mansion wasn't a home, it was a prison, and the brothers had broken free, but at a cost that stained them forever. Judalon's words were a knife, cutting through the fog of the case, but they left me reeling. I sat in the precinct, her statement spread across my desk, each word a weight I couldn't ignore. Eric's confession was vivid, almost too real, like he'd lived it 1,000 times in his mind. He described the shotguns, heavy in their hands, the way the living room had felt too small, too final. Jose's eyes, he said, had widened just before the first shot, a flicker of betrayal before the world exploded. Kitty's screams were worse, high and desperate, as she crawled across the floor, her nails tearing at the wood, reaching for a son who wouldn't save her. The air was thick with the scent of blood and fear, the room a chaos of red and ruin. I closed my eyes, seeing it all, feeling the weight of their pain, their rage. I remembered my own father, a man of quiet cruelty, his words sharper than any blade. I'd escaped him, but the Menendez brothers hadn't. Their escape was bloodier, messier, and it left me wondering if freedom was ever worth that price. We arrested Lyle and Eric in March 1990. Lyle fought, his eyes blazing, while Eric went quietly, his face blank, his hands shaking. The arrests were only the beginning. I stood outside the precinct as they were brought in, their faces a study in contrast. Lyle's jaw set, his eyes defiant. Eric's shoulders slumped, his gaze distant, like he was already somewhere else. The media descended, their cameras flashing, their questions a relentless drumbeat. I avoided them, retreating to my car, the leather seats cold against my skin. The confession played in my mind, a loop I couldn't stop. Eric's voice, broken, but steady, describing the years of abuse, the nights that stole their childhood. Lyle's silence heavier than words, carrying the weight of a brother who'd suffered longer, harder. I saw my own past in their story, the way my father's anger had shaped me, left scars no one could see. But I hadn't killed him. I'd walked away. The Menendez brothers hadn't, and that choice haunted me, a question I couldn't answer. What pushes someone to cross that line, to trade pain for blood? The trial was a circus, the world watching as the brothers' story unfolded. They claimed self-defense, their lawyers painting a picture of a childhood stolen by abuse. The prosecution called it greed, a cold-blooded grab for inheritance. I sat in the courtroom, my notes heavy in my hands, my mind torn. I saw the pain in Eric's eyes, the way his voice broke when he spoke of his father. I saw Lyle's anger, the way he carried himself like a man who'd survived a war. But I also saw the blood, the planning, the shotguns they'd chosen for maximum destruction. The first trial ended in a deadlock, the jury unable to choose between victims and monsters. The second, in 1996, was different, harsher, stripping away their defense, focusing on the act, not the why. They were convicted, sentenced to life without parole. I watched them led away, their faces unreadable, their futures sealed in concrete and steel. The years since the trial have been a slow unraveling. I left homicide, took a desk job, tried to outrun the case, but it follows me. I see the Menendez brothers in every news clip, every true crime show. Their faces frozen in time. Their story a puzzle no one can solve. I keep a file on them, hidden, in my desk, a collection of notes, photos, questions I'll never answer. I think of Jose and Kitty, their lives cut short, their sins laid bare. I think of Lyle and Eric, locked away, their pain a shadow that stretches across decades. I visit the mansion sometimes, standing on the curb, watching the lights in the windows. It's different now, alive with new voices, new lives, but I feel them still. Jose's control, Kitty's silence, the brothers' rage. They're part of me, a scar I can't erase. The Menendez murders taught me that truth is a ghost, always there, but never clear. A shadow that haunts you long after the blood has dried. The case never left me. I drive past the mansion sometimes, its new owners unaware of the blood that once soaked its floors. I see shadows in the windows, faint outlines of a family that never found peace. I think of Eric's eyes, the way they held a pain I couldn't see. I think of Lyle's sobs, the way they stopped too soon. Were they killers or survivors? I still don't know. The truth is a ghost, slipping through my fingers, haunting me in the quiet of the night. The Menendez murders weren't just a case, they were a mirror, showing me a world where love and hate are the same, where justice feels like betrayal. I carry their story, a weight I can't put down, a reminder that some truths are too heavy to bear. I don't sleep much anymore. The nights are too quiet, too full of memories that won't stay buried. I sit on my porch, a cigarette burning in my hand, its smoke curling into the dark like the questions I can't let go. I see Eric's eyes, the way they held a pain that wasn't just his, but his brother's, his mother's, his father's. I see Lyle's hands clenched in the courtroom, holding a secret he'd never share. I think of the mansion, its walls still standing, its history rewritten by time but never erased. I remember a priest I met years ago after another case that broke me, who said evil isn't a thing. It's a choice, a moment when someone decides to let the darkness win. I didn't believe him then, but now, after the Menendez case, I'm not so sure. Were Lyle and Eric evil, or were they victims pushed too far? I don't know. And that not knowing is a weight I carry, a truth I'll take to my grave. The Menendez murders didn't just end a family. They ended me, left me a man who sees blood in every shadow, who hears screams in every silence. The city has changed, but the ghosts haven't. I walk its streets, avoiding the places where the past feels too close, but they find me anyway. I see Jose in the faces of powerful men, their smiles hiding something sharp. I see Kitty in women who look away, their eyes heavy with secrets. And the brothers, they're everywhere in the news. In my dreams, in the quiet moments when the world slows down, I try to move on, to build a life free of their story, but it's no use. The Menendez case is a part of me, a wound that bleeds fresh every time I close my eyes. I keep a journal now, writing down what I remember, what I felt, what I still don't understand. The pages are messy, stained with coffee and regret, but they're all I have. Some nights I drive to the edge of the city where the lights fade and the stars are clear, and I talk to them. Jose, Kitty, Lyle, Eric. I ask them why, but they never answer. The Menendez murders are my curse, a story I can't finish, a truth that burns like a flame I can't put out. The phone buzzed on my nightstand, its harsh light slicing through the darkness of my room, pulling me from a restless sleep. Liam's name glowed on the screen, a name that always carried trouble, like a storm cloud hovering too close. Ignore it, go back to sleep, I told myself, but my thumb hovered, a knot tightening in my chest. Liam didn't call for nothing. His voice, low and urgent, crackled through when I answered. Yo, come pick me up. Bradley Beach now. The words were sharp, clipped, leaving no room for questions. What's he done this time, I wondered, already regretting my decision as I grabbed my keys. The night was freezing, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The streets empty except for the occasional flicker of headlights. I drove to the beach parking lot, my breath fogging the windshield, my hands gripping the wheel too tight. Liam was there, pacing under a dim street light, his hoodie pulled low, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying a secret too heavy to hold. He slid into the passenger seat, the door shutting with a dull thud, his presence filling the car with a nervous energy. His face was pale, his eyes wild, glinting with something I couldn't place. Excitement, fear, or something darker. He rubbed his hands together, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts, like he was trying to contain a fire inside. Stay calm. Just hear him out, I thought, adjusting my phone in my pocket, making sure the hidden camera was rolling. All right, man, what's going on? I asked, my voice steady despite the dread creeping up my spine. Liam leaned back, a grin spreading across his face, slow and wavering, like he was savoring a secret. Bro, I did it. It's done. My heart skipped, a chill running through me. Did what? What are you talking about? His grin widened, his teeth catching the faint light, and he leaned closer, the smell of cigarette smoke and metal on his breath. Sarah, man, she's gone, vanished, poof. Sarah? No, he's messing with you, I thought, but my stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. What do you mean, gone? I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam's eyes gleamed and he chuckled, a low, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. I killed her, bro. Strangled her with my own hands, right in her house. The air in the car felt heavy, suffocating, as if his words had sucked the oxygen out. My hands tightened on the wheel, my knuckles white, as he leaned back, stretching, like he was recounting a night at a bar. "You have no idea how long it takes for someone to die like that," he said, his voice casual, almost proud. "It's not like the movies, it takes forever." My mind reeled, images flashing, Sarah with her bright laugh, her messy ponytail, now lifeless. This isn't real, he's lying, I told myself. But his voice kept going, pulling me into his nightmare. She kept fighting, her nails clawing at my arms, scratching like a wild animal. I thought she'd go quick, but no, she thrashed, her whole body jerking. I had to push down hard, pin her with my knee. My stomach churned, the image too vivid. Sarah's eyes wide, her lips turning blue, her hands grasping at nothing. "Jesus, Liam," I managed, my voice shaking. He laughed, a soft, chilling sound, shaking his head. "You should have seen her face, man. Her eyes got so big, her tongue just hung there, twitching. That's when I knew I had her. I forced myself to breathe. My hands trembling as I gripped the wheel, the camera in my pocket burning against my thigh. "Why, Liam? Why would you do this?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. His face darkened, the grin fading for a moment, replaced by something cold, calculating. "Money, brother. She had that inheritance. Thought I'd be rolling in it." He snorted, his voice bitter. "But you know what's funny? It was all old bills, practically worthless. I killed her for nothing." The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a punch, my chest tightening as I pictured Sarah's life snuffed out for a fantasy. "You're a monster." I wanted to scream, but I kept, my voice steady, needing him to keep talking, to spill every detail. "What did you do after?" I asked, my throat dry. Liam leaned forward, his voice dropping as if sharing a secret. "Had to move her body. Stuffed her in the passenger seat of her car, forced her into the seatbelt to make it look natural. Her head kept flopping to the side, her mouth hanging open like she was still trying to say something. Creepy as hell, man." The car felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of his confession. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. "Where is she now?" I asked, dreading the answer. Liam cracked, his neck stretching like he'd just finished a workout. "Route 35 bridge, Preston helped me. We took her there, dead of night. It was freezing, man. Popped the trunk and there she was, just lying there, almost peaceful like she was sleeping. But no, she was dead." My breath caught, the image searing into my mind. Sarah's body, cold and still, under the bridge's shadow. "You threw her?" I asked, my voice trembling. Liam grinned, his eyes glinting with a sick pride. "Hoisted her up, dragged her to the railing. She was heavy, dead weight's no joke. Then we dropped her just like that into the black water below. No sound, no scream, just gone, swallowed by the dark." "Sarah, I'm sorry," I thought, my chest aching, the weight of her loss crushing me. The distant wail of sirens broke the silence, faint but growing closer. Liam froze, his grin sliding off his face, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "What's that?" he asked, his voice sharp. I didn't answer, my heart racing as the flashing lights appeared, red and blue cutting through the night. Liam's eyes widened, panic creeping in. "You called them?" he hissed, his voice rising. I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. "You just confessed to murder, Liam. On camera." He lunged, his hands reaching for me, but I pushed him back, my arm shaking. The police cars surrounded us, officers shouting for him to get out. Liam's face twisted with rage, his eyes burning into mine, but he was trapped. As they handcuffed him, the camera kept rolling, his voice echoing through the car, cold and unfeeling, recounting every horrific detail. He glared at me, his betrayal a wound I'd carry, but I didn't flinch. Justice for Sarah, I thought, as the sirens faded, taking him away. The weeks that followed were a blur of guilt and relief. The trial was swift, Liam's confession sealing. His fate, life in prison without parole. Preston, his accomplice, took a plea deal, sentenced to 18 years. Sarah's body was never found. Her absence a void that haunted her family, her friends, me. I'd known her, laughed with her, and now her memory was tainted by Liam's voice, his casual cruelty replaying in my mind. You could have stopped. Him you should have seen, I told myself, the weight of my inaction heavy. Some nights I'd dream of the bridge, the black water below, Sarah's face staring up, her eyes wide, accusing. The Sarah Stern murder case, a betrayal turned deadly, left a scar on Neptune City. Liam Makatis, her childhood friend, killed her for money that didn't exist. And I, the one who heard his confession, will never escape the sound of his voice or the silence where Sarah's should be. This story is based on the 2016 murder of Sarah Stern, a 19-year-old from Neptune City, New Jersey. Liam Makatis strangled her, believing she had inherited money, and with Preston Taylor disposed of her body off the Route 35 bridge. A friend's hidden recording of Makatis's confession led to his conviction for first-degree murder, a chilling tale of greed and betrayal.